three-way split. Despite the condemnation of Nestorius, the row simmered on. The emperor had condemned Nestorius, sure, but he hadn't exactly endorsed the Alexandrians. So typically everyone overreacted and went to the other extreme, as represented by an archimandrite, is that the word, in Constantinople called Eutyches. An archimandrite is a leader of several monasteries, not a fossil, although frankly he was getting on a bit. Archi means to lead, so archbishop is a leader of a group of bishops, an architect is a leader of a group of texts. Okay. The problem with the Nestorians was the idea that in the incarnate Christ there were two distinct persons, one divine and the other human. Mary was, in a way, giving birth to twins, just in one body. Christ had, therefore, two natures. Eutyches countered with the idea that Christ had a single nature, that his human nature was utterly absorbed in the divine. His followers became known as monophysites, from the Greek mono plus physis equals single nature. However, both the two-nature and the single-nature Christians simply preferred to call themselves orthodox. In their eyes, it's the other lot who are heretics. This was felt to be as heretical as Nestorius' view, just in the opposite direction. The new bishop of Constantinople, Flavian, accused Eutyches of heresy and had him removed from his post. Eutyches, perhaps following the honourable example of Chrysostom, appealed to the emperor and to his fellow monks. I'll tell you what, anyone who would listen, frankly. The row unleashed chaos. There was council after council, bishops were sacked and unsacked. There were massive rows between Rome, Constantinople and Alexandria. A council was arranged in Ephesus in 449. Eutyches appealed to Pope Leo I, 440 to 461, who saw this as a chance to establish papal supremacy in matters of theology. Leo was rather keen on supremacy. Indeed, as the Roman Empire crumbled around him, Leo resurrected an old title, Pontifex Maximus, High Priest, a title that had once been used by emperors such as Augustus. Now Leo took it for the Pope. This was an Eastern problem, and Leo certainly wasn't going to travel all the way to Constantinople, but he sent a written judgment known simply as the Tome, Latin for text or letter, which he confidently believed would sort the whole thing out. Now, perhaps it might have, if it hadn't been completely ignored. It may not even have been read out. The only Western representatives were an otherwise unknown bishop called Julius and a deacon called Hilarius, who, hilariously, later became Pope. These represented Pope Leo I. Originally, there was a third member of their team, a priest called Renatus, but he died on the way. Honestly, the lengths some people will go to get out of a meeting. Okay. Instead, the Monophysites were victorious at the conference, largely because they had the backing of the emperor, his soldiers, and a group of incongruously armed monks. Bishop Flavian was not only deposed, but was apparently beaten to death by Egyptian clergy. The situation changed, though, when the emperor died in a riding accident, and his sister, Pulcheria, took over. She was an enemy of the Monophysites in Constantinople. Being a girl, of course, albeit a 61-year-old one, she wasn't actually allowed to rule, but she armed herself with a thoroughly house-trained husband, and through him called a further council at Chalcedon in 451. At Chalcedon, Leo's tome had its delayed premiere. According to the suspiciously fulsome official account, it was met with rapturous approval. The assembled bishops cried out, "This is the faith of the fathers, this is the faith of the apostles. So we all believe, thus the Orthodox believe. Peter has spoken thus through Leo," before continuing, Leo, he's the man. If he can't do it, no pope can," etc., etc. Once again, Leo didn't attend in person. He sent a 5-man delegation, none of whom died on the way. There were also 2 bishops from North Africa. Apart from that, the rest of the some 600 delegates were from the East. The council decided that both extremes, Nestorius and Eutyches, were wrong, and they endorsed the teachings of Leo, Cyril, and the late Flavian. But the empress pushed for more. She wanted them to come up with a definitive, watertight statement about Jesus. So they produced what has been known as the definition of Chalcedon. This stated that Jesus was perfect in divinity and also perfect in humanity, truly God and truly man, of a rational soul and body, consubstantial with the Father according to his divinity, and consubstantial with us, according to his humanity. He went on to state that the distinction of natures being by no means taken away by the union, but rather the property of each nature being preserved. I hope you've got that. No? Me neither. But let's just say that Chalcedon stated that Christ is entirely God and entirely man, and that his humanity and divinity are neither separate nor completely merged. Having established that to everyone's satisfaction, they went on to make some other decisions, notably that bishops were not allowed to sell ordinations, and that the clergy should not form lynch mobs, carry off women, or loot the houses of bishops after their death. I must remind my vicar of this. They also took the opportunity to further condemn Nestorius, who had by now died in his remote high-security Egyptian prison. The puppet emperor ordered Nestorius' writings to be burned, and any children bearing his name were to be renamed and rebaptized. And that was that. Game over. Oh, for heaven's sake, of course it wasn't. Many sections of the Eastern Church simply refused to sign up to what they saw as a fudged compromise. And Chalcedon didn't actually answer any of the questions, it just booted the questions into touch, which is the problem with such councils of whatever flavour. You cannot force people to be moderate. You can aim for the middle of the road, but that leaves plenty of room in the outside lanes for people to race away in some other direction. That's what happened at Chalcedon. Those who believed differently went on believing differently. The Nestorians packed their bags and left. They went further east, into the Persian Empire, where they formed one of the longest-lasting and most neglected branches of the church, a church that was active for centuries, that even sent missionaries to Arabia, China and India. They were in fact much more successful in these areas than their Western colleagues. Other churches also refused to sign up. In Egypt, the church split into two branches, a minority who accepted Chalcedon and the majority who remained Monophysite. The Armenian and Georgian churches, who had not been represented in the council's discussions, also dissented. And in 450, there were still Donatists, Novatians, Arians, Montanists, and even Marcionites around. And these churches simply withdrew from the imperial faith. Although historically these churches have been called Monophysite, they resented and still resent the label. They prefer the term Miaphysite, which also means one nature, but in the sense of one unified nature. In Christ, the divine and the human nature are united in one. It is still a compound nature, but mixed up into one. Convinced that from their point of view heresy was as endemic in the empire, they moved to the margins, to Persia, to Syria, to the Coptic-speaking areas of Egypt. This had two effects. The first was at the centre of Orthodox Christianity, the children of Chalcedon shifted a bit to the west. The second was that 2 centuries later, when Islamic Arabs started attacking the empire, these branches of Christianity refused to fight for what they saw as a heretical empire. Chalcedon, historically depicted as a triumph of orthodoxy, actually left Christianity split into 3 and seriously weakened the empire in the east. That's enough.